talking about UFC, a lot of people were sticking their hand in the air and saying, I'll be happy to welcome him in. Were you one of those guys? Was this one where Dana came to you and said, hey, what do you think about this fight?
No, I was absolutely one of those guys. I heard his hit list and all the things he was saying about the MMA guys and how he was going to knock them all out, and I was certainly on that list. And so I was definitely a guy that raised my hand and said, hey, I'll be happy to welcome him.
Why do you think it's you that got the decision? Because a lot of people, again, wanted to take that fight. Why do you think Dana went with you?
I'm not sure, but I suspect because I tend to be a pretty cerebral fighter. I'm not going to get in there and try to prove anything with James and get into a striking match with him. I think they realize with my background and the way I've won most of my fights, pretty good chance that I'm going to be able to take him down and put him on his back, and I think ultimately make the point that needs to be made.
Now, Dana's come out and said this is a freak show fight, and obviously everybody's asking James how he feels about that, but how do you feel about being involved in something that people are calling a freak show?
I don't think it's a freak show fight. I think people have to give James credit for the things he's accomplished in boxing. I certainly accomplished a lot of things in wrestling, and nobody really chose to give me any credit for when I made my way into MMA. And those combative sports count for something. James is going to be dangerous, especially early in the fight. He's got an interesting boxing style. He's explosive. He's got good hands. I've got to be very, very attentive, especially early on, and set him up and be diligent and not let him draw me into those kinds of exchanges. And I think that makes for an interesting fight. I think that the cool thing is we'll probably attract a lot of eyes from boxing that we wouldn't have otherwise attracted, and that's great for the sport.
Obviously, you're kind of known for your Greco style, the clinch, that sort of thing. Do you think you can be effective there, or was that kind of a dangerous position for you, knowing what boxers do in the clinch as well?
I think with the solid barrier, I can be effective from that range. I don't think James has had anybody hang on him or attach themselves to him the way a wrestler, especially a Greco wrestler, will. So I certainly am prepared to deal with him in that range. There's things I need to be aware of, and he's a good inside fighter, and most boxers are. I still need to be aware there. I need to make sure it's wrestling and not be as loose. And I've kind of adapted my wrestling to create opportunities to strike and create spaces in there to hit and all those things. But it's not really the game with James. I don't really want to get too carried away with James until I get him on his back.
And then then you get carried away a little bit.
Will you look for the submission, or do you think you'll get on top and beat on him?
Well, I would love to choke the hell out of him. Absolutely. I think that's a big piece of mixed martial arts, and certainly a big piece of the game I've been working on. And I think he's going to make some mistakes and give me some positions to make that a possibility.
What are you really expecting from him? Because there's kind of been, you've heard both sides. You've kind of heard that, he's just going to come in with his boxing and he feels comfortable with that. And then you read other reports that he's working on his wrestling and he's taking it seriously. I mean, what are you absolutely expecting out of him?
Well, I'm sure he is taking it seriously. But realistically, in 3 months, how much wrestling is he going to learn? How much better at submission and the other things is he really going to be? I've been doing this for a long time, so he's got a long ways to go to catch up. And I'll give him credit; he's a good athlete, and probably a great athlete, and a great boxer. But that doesn't always translate to mixed martial arts. And so, I hope that he has done some of those other things, because that'll hopefully keep him in there longer and make it a better fight. But if he's just dragging boxing up in there, as long as I'm diligent and don't get careless, I should be able to control the bout and control him and put him on the ground and take advantage of him in a lot of ways, not just do a ground and pound and punch him in the face, but he's going to make mistakes and give up submission positions.
And to some degree, you've kind of been where James is at, coming in with the wrestling background, as opposed to him coming in with the boxing background. Do you find that, or did you find early on that there was a difference between how much you can learn versus how much you can apply in an actual fight?
There's always a big difference. I felt like I was learning something new every single day, but it was still a long time before any of that stuff got implemented in a real fight against a real resisting opponent. And that's when you know you really have it, when you can do it against a resisting guy. It's one thing to learn the technique and be able to catalog it and say, yeah, I know this and I know that and I know that. But until you really execute it in a real situation, it's not really yours.
So to some degree, do you kind of hope that he may go out and try to experiment a little bit instead of sticking to the striking and try to wrestle with you a little bit?
Well, that'll be interesting. That would be unexpected. I think especially when the pressure's on, and if you listen to him talk, certainly he's going to come out and he wants to try and tear my head off. He wants to box. He wants to try and land that punch that's going to end the night. And that's what's going to make him feel good and kind of salvage where he's put himself, both in the MMA world and the boxing world. So, it'll be interesting to see if he does try to do any wrestling or do anything else. I don't really expect him to do that.
Have you brought in any big boxers to help you get prepared for the fight?
You know what? I've got a great crew of guys here. Gil Martinez has a plethora of boxers, some of which have come in and kind of mimic James' style, and Gil himself has mimicked James' style a lot. Ray Sefo has been remarkable. Amazing kickboxer, incredibly explosive, about the same build as James, a little more fit than James tends to be, but about the same size, 245 pounds, very, very quick and explosive. And he's been a great workout partner and a great coach for me in this training camp.
You talked about being a cerebral fighter, not trying to get into a firefight with him. Was there, I mean, at any time in your camp or when you're thinking about this fight, you think, man, I would maybe like to trade hands with him just for a second and see how it works out, or do you just say, that's silly?
You know, it's a challenge for me because I'm pretty aggressive. My style of fighting is to kind of bring it and be aggressive, and I have to be real careful not to get sucked into that. You know, I have that tendency in practice sometimes. It's like, you know, if you get after it and want to punch a guy in the head instead of really focusing on the game plan and staying true to that, and, you know, being attentive and aware. I'm sure with James standing right there looking me in the face, I will be very attentive. He'll have my undivided attention.
Do you? I mean, you know, he's kind of saying, hey, a boxer with these smaller gloves on, that's one punch knockout power. Do you think that's a given? You know, that he'll have that kind of power?
No, I don't think so. I think if he stands in that more traditional boxing stance where he can really take advantage of that, the mechanics of throwing that kind of punch. First of all, he's going to be vulnerable to a lot of things. Second of all, I don't know if you've seen his hands, but he's very slight. He's got very, very small hands. You know, he started out at 160 some pounds in boxing. He's not a great big guy with big bones and, you know, Brock Lesnar throwing canned hams at your ass. It's not going to happen. So I think he has to be aware that if he starts trying to unleash with those 4-ounce gloves, it's not as much protection as he used to. You're not allowed to tape the same way the boxers do. You know, a 4-ounce MMA glove is a lot different than a 10 or 12-ounce boxing glove. So there's yeah, maybe it feels like you can hit harder, but I don't think that's always accurate.
And you talked about, you know, you'd love to choke him out. You know, it's exciting to you. Is that because you want to send a message to Toney personally? Is it things that he said or done in the build to this fight, or is it just, you know, boxers coming in assuming they can compete? What is the motivation for that?
No, I don't need to send any. I mean, just getting in there is message enough. It's about me personally, the stuff that I've been working on since the Nogueira camp with Neil, and trying to improve on my submission game, my ground fighting game, and incorporate more wrestling, catch wrestling tactics and technique. And so it's way more about recognizing those positions in this fight and finding that for myself. It has nothing to do with James.
Is there any chance that I mean, we've seen you tapping some guys on the butt and giving some spankings and things like that. You know, when you get Toney on the ground, is there going to be any playing around there, or is it all business?
Yeah, you know, that was such a unique situation with Tito that I could have never imagined in the last 30 seconds of the fight, ending up in that circumstance and having that pop into my head. You know, is this one of those things? The light went off, and I was like, you know, I don't expect that that's going to happen again, but I mean, you never know. James has certainly run his mouth, and you know, in some ways that's interesting. It's good because it's created some hype and some interest in this fight for a lot of people, and I don't really plug into any of that. It doesn't matter to me. On the day, he's still got to walk up in that cage, and all the talk goes away. So I don't take any of it personally. I haven't plugged into any of it, so I don't need to make any special statements with him.
If you weren't on that initial, I guess, hit list that Toney had when he came in, would you have still kind of stepped up and said, hey, I want to fight this guy? And
sure.
To the UFC?
Yeah, I think whether I was one of the guys he thought he wanted to knock out or not, I still found it to be an interesting matchup, and to have a world-class athlete like that step in is intriguing and interesting to me. So I would have still been happy to and thrown my name in the hat to be selected for this fight.
And do you have respect for him for the fact that he's taking this, or do you think it's, you know, a paycheck for him or just a freak show?
I don't know about any of that stuff. I give him credit for the boxing that he's achieved in all, 80-some fights. He's been a tremendous competitor in that sport, and a lot of boxers have run their mouth, and none of them have been willing to step up, even challenged, and they won't step up. So you got to give him credit. He was, willing to put his money where his mouth was and step up and sign on the dotted line.
And I think they've kind of challenged you that there's people that say, no, you should come box. I mean, does that even make sense?
I'm not running my head about boxing. I'm not going out saying boxers suck and I've knocked all those bastards out. And I'm not saying any of that stuff. So it doesn't go both ways. I have a lot of respect for boxing and what boxers do, and I've spent a lot of time in my fight career trying to shore up and make boxing part of my arsenal. So I'm not coming from that kind of disrespectful, disdainful place that a lot of the boxers are coming from. I've never had any illusion that I was a world-class boxer. I'm a mixed martial artist, and I apply boxing in my fighting style. That's simple.
Do you feel like you're fighting for the sport then in this fight?
I'm not carrying that pressure. This sport's going to continue to explode around the globe, whether I win this fight or not. So people want to attribute it to MMA versus boxing and all that. And in some ways that's true, but it doesn't put any more pressure on me. I'm still going to smile and go out there and do what I train to do.
Are you surprised, or what are your thoughts on some of the boxers that have come out and said James Toney is crazy for doing this, and it's a different sport and that kind of thing?
Well, I think those guys have a pretty rational view, and I think a healthy respect for what we do as mixed martial artists, just like I exhibit that same respect for boxing and what boxers do. I've heard Bernard and some of the other guys stepping up and say he's nuts, he's going to get trashed, and I hope that's the case. It's definitely what I intend to do, but still have to give him credit for the skills that he brings into the cage, and he's going to be dangerous.
Did you learn anything from the